All right, welcome back, my name's Teo. How we doing? How we doing? Apologize about the glare, by the way. I don't have a curtain for this window. It's that time of the day, but um, the big news of the day is that Zcash has flipped Monero um, on the market cap rankings, right? And of course, this is causing a big hoopla in the X space. And we've got some interesting commentary going on there. I did make a commitment in one of my X posts to stop hating on Zcash, not because of these squirrely people out here who are saying you need to stop being toxic and they're trying to gaslight us into thinking everything's totally normal and organic, but just because I don't want to be a rank hater. I want to focus on what I think is value, which is Monero, the circular economy, my life. you know, I don't want to be a hater. But we'll talk a little bit about the developments today. I've got some tabs pulled up. There's some back and forth, of course, going on. Some friendly flicker fire between the Monero Bros and the Zcash people. What do you call the Zcash people? Do we have a name for them? We got Zano Bros, Monero Bros, um, the Bitcoin Bros. I don't know what to call the Zcash people. It just doesn't mess with anything. The I don't know. I don't know what to call them. Leave a comment if you know what to call them. But yeah, there's been some back and forth a little bit that I want to address. And then I also want to address some other things that have come up in conversations with Zcash people. I'm trying to be more civil, I'm trying to be more nice. But there's a couple things that just continue to pop up that I want to address just on a video because it's a good opportunity to talk about something substantive. So, um, both have a similar market cap of about $6 billion, and you have to understand that Zcash is listed on Coinbase. Okay. This is why it has rocketed up in value so much. If Monero was there, this would have never happened. But because Zcash is much more accessible to people, people are more able to go into Zcash, people are more able to promote it and get popularity from it because they can incentivize people to buy it easier. So, and also they have a marketing budget, right? Because they have a dev tax and they can spend that dev tax on things like marketing. So, this all kind of plays into the recent rise that we've had over the last few weeks, which it's gone up something like 900% or something crazy like that. We'll see how long it lasts. I mean, if I were a Zcash holder, I'd be incredibly concerned about it flipping Monero, actually, because I think everybody knows, and I do have some disingenuous people who like try to debate me on, what's more useful, Zcash or Monero, but everybody knows Monero is more widely used, has a higher transaction volume, has a bigger ecosystem, just has a stronger culture. I mean, even Nick Fuentes is talking about it, and he's basically like the most popular commentator in at least America at the moment. So, personally, to me, if I were holding Zcash, I'd start to check myself and say, hey, this has been quite a ride, but we're now passing, the most popular private crypto that's out there. And maybe we're a little bit overvalued at this point. But I don't know how to trade this stuff. I'm not a trader. It's just all gambling at the end of the day for the most part. But um, as far as transaction volume, this is from Schmidt. He says Zcash versus Monero transaction volume. We've got about 25K transaction volume uh, month over month, or at least over the last 2 months on average. And then Zcash, you're going from about 2.5 transaction or 2.5 thousand transactions to about 10,000 transactions for transaction volume. And a lot of this has to do with the recent rise in the price. It didn't really start going up until October. And so it's definitely had a lot of activity lately. And again, one thing to just point out, most of these transactions for Monero not taking place on centralized exchanges. So it's not just about the transaction volume, the quantity of the transactions, it's also the quality. What are the people buying Zcash here for? And we'll actually get to that later in the video. Yeah, here's my tip page, by the way, if you want to leave a tip. Anon, you say, check out Helio Wave on YouTube. I looked at his video titles and views and knew ... shadow banned. Okay. I'll check it out if you guys want to check out Helio Wave. Mr. Anon, who left a super chat, wants to check out Helio Wave. If you want to leave a super chat, xmartchat.com and CPA. Link is below. All right. So here's an interesting tweet from somebody who is the executive director at Shielded Labs, committee member Zcash Comms Grants, Zcash community grants. So this is presumably a fairly important guy in the Zcash community. And this is what he says about the flipping. He says, the market understands that privacy has real world use cases beyond dark markets. So what he says here is basically this, posting this picture and saying what he said. He's basically saying, hey, Monero's only value is on dark markets. And because people have needs for privacy coins outside of dark markets, that's why Zcash is now superseding Monero, as if Monero is not used outside of dark markets and Zcash is. And Doug responds, he says, Zcash passes Monero in market cap, and now you want to label all Monero users as criminal darknet users. So yeah, he catches up on it. He asks, Zcash is legal for privacy use cases and Monero is for illegal use cases only? Because that's what he's saying. And you see other Zcash people who are trying to make this a narrative. They're basically trying to say Zcash is the legal privacy coin and Monero, it's a bad privacy coin. It's only used for illegal purposes. So you don't want to associate with them. We don't want to associate with them. And they're going to shoot themselves in the foot for doing this, because Bitcoin got its first rise in popularity because it was used on the DNMs, actually. And that is kind of the core use case for cryptocurrency, is the darknet marketplace. It really is. That is the core unique use case, I would say, because there's nothing else that you're going to use. Now, if you're in the regulated marketplace, you could still get value from using Monero, without a doubt. But there are other alternatives that you could certainly use instead of Monero that also have privacy, but maybe don't have as much privacy. Maybe you're using fiat still, but you don't want to use fiat because maybe you don't have fiat. Maybe you're all in on crypto. But as far as DNMs, you can only use cryptocurrency. And if you're going to be engaging in that kind of activity, you want to use the cryptocurrency which protects your privacy the most, which is why DNMs have increasingly moved towards using Monero exclusively. Now, a lot of them still use Bitcoin just because Bitcoin's the most liquid and the most popular and so on and so forth, but it really is just those two nowadays. You never see Zcash there, and these Zcash people, they try to judo flip that into a kind of argument that says, well, we are a privacy coin, but you see, the only people who use us are people who are not bad, and that's a good thing. But the problem with that is you're going to have a lot of people raise suspicion about the value of your privacy and how private it actually is. Because, and I explained this in a prior video, most people don't understand moon math. Most people are not going to dig into the code. Most people, they don't know who to trust in regards to what works and what doesn't. And so if you're able to see the fact that a lot of people on these DNMs use Monero, that's in many cases all of the information that you need, right? To know that it works for its intended purpose. And they want to deny that. And almost nobody in the Monero community is saying that people should be doing illegal things with Monero. I'm certainly not one of them. Most of the hardcore privacy people that I've talked to in this space, they don't advocate for that stuff publicly either. We have a few people who are probably federal agents who are in this space who are seemingly advocating for that. We don't advocate for that, but we all acknowledge at the same time that because it's used in darknet marketplaces, that means that you can rely on the fact that the privacy probably works, because you have people trying to track those people down, and they are unsuccessful most of the time unless they have another OPSEC problem that exposes their identity. And it's never the fault of Monero. It's always some alternative OPSEC mistake. And so discounting that is a mistake on the behalf of the Zcash people, and that's something that I think is a fault to them, and it's probably a twofold thing they're trying to do. One, they're trying to appeal to the regulators, which they evidently are trying to do with the transparent addresses being transparent by default and establishing these relationships with these kinds of people who are in the regulated area. But also, they're trying to put down the competition, which is obviously Monero. That's their biggest competition. So if they can say at the same time, well, we have this illegal coin over here that's only used by evil people and criminals and so on and so forth, and they could contrast that with their coin that says criminals don't use our coin, we're legally compliant, but you have great privacy at the same time. They're trying to accomplish two things with one statement there. They're trying to kill two birds in one stone. And that's not going to come back on them, I think, really well. And I think people who are becoming ever more extreme in their views just naturally because of everything that's going on, we are kind of in an extreme environment, they're not going to like that kind of diddle daddling. They're not going to like that kind of dishonesty either, because this is fundamentally dishonest, this kind of statement, because you can see with a 5-minute Google search that people are using Monero everywhere. So this is XMR Bazaar. There are hundreds of postings on here. There are people selling phone cases. There are people selling gift cards. Um, there are people selling guitar lessons. There are people selling computers. Here's Monerica. This is my website. And by the way, I guess I ought to plug myself. I'm a CPA. I offer tax services and bookkeeping services. I'm expanding my services to offer fractional CFO services for companies that need some, financial guidance and consultations. And you go back to Monerica, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. You got people doing AI services, you got artwork, you have automotive services all over the world. Books are being sold, design services. I could go on. This goes on forever. And so the idea that Monero is just used for darknet purposes is completely wrong. And this is a problem, that this is becoming a narrative on the behalf of the Zcash people, because it's very easily disprovable. And if you're trying to appeal to regulators and put down your competition through dishonest methods, people are going to see right through that and they're not going to like it. And they're going to be highly suspicious, especially due to the fact that if they look into your coin, they find that there's a lot of, Israeli ties and DARPA ties and intelligence ties and stuff like that to the development of the project, which I've heard a lot of people say is like low hanging fruit. You shouldn't talk about that. That's just toxic commentary. Doesn't matter. People are going to see that and they're not going to like that. They're going to put this stuff together and you're just going to have a bad vibe about your project. So it's, and I don't think anything of what I'm saying is necessarily unfair or antagonistic. I think I'm just kind of calling it as it is based on what I'm seeing it. Now, I do want to just real quickly show some good faith to the Zcash people. I want to see if there's an economy for Zcash, because increasingly something that we're seeing is this concept of value at rest. Okay, this is something that a lot of the Zcash people are saying. It's a part of their narrative. It's something I've never heard before until recently, like literally maybe a week or two ago. And now this is a big talking point on the behalf of Zcash Bros as to why their coin has value, is because it sits there. And just to kind of evidence this, this is a guy named Colby. He's responding to a guy, and I had muted the Zcash words. I just couldn't put up with it anymore. So this guy's like, why do people like Zcash more than Monero? And a lot of people responded. This was a hot debated battleground. And this guy Colby said, Zcash privacy is based on many coins sitting together in the shielded pool. Therefore, they're quote unquote at rest. Over time, it gets harder and harder to tell which coin was sent into the pool by who. Leave them there long enough, and it becomes impossible. And this is a problem because of the transparent address issue. And basically, you can only get Zcash from a KYC exchange. Where else are you going to get it? Because nobody transacts outside of the centralized exchanges for the most part. And so you're going to have to delink yourself from the transparent address. And so that is his argument as to why it gains value at rest, because you're in the shielded pool. The longer you're in the shielded pool, the more you delink from that history, from the shielded or from the unshielded address. And he says Zuku coined the term privacy is gained from an asset at rest rather than in travel. And you already see where this is going. I think uh, you see some flickers going off there in the audience. We'll kind of get to that because I think you can kind of see what's happening, right? Okay, so he says Monero doesn't use this privacy. It instead mixes your coins during travel. Now, what does during travel mean? Why are they framing this in a different way? Because what they are saying there during travel is you're transacting the coin. You're actually using the coin. And so we're kind of back to this whole store of value versus medium of exchange thing. And it's almost like we're revisiting 2017 with the block size war, with Bitcoin Cash making the case that you get value from using the cryptocurrency as a currency, and then Bitcoin, you get value from the currency by holding the currency, hodl, diamond hands, it's going to go up if nobody sells or uses it. Let's all just buy it and hold and have the value go up and have the regulators and the institutions and everybody adopt our coin so we can take over the world and get rich. Okay. You kind of see the parallels. So, um, he goes on to talk about decoy transactions. He doesn't mention stealth addresses. A lot of people think it's just the decoys. It's not just the decoys because it's stealth addresses as a default for all of the wallets, not like Zcash where you have transparent addresses as the default for all the wallets. We don't have the problem of having to get into a shielded pool. You're already in the pool, unless you're on a KYC exchange, of course. But when you take it off the KYC exchange, you're in the pool. You don't have to go to a transparent address and then get into the pool or just remember to get there in the first place, because a lot of people forget to get into the pool, right? Because again, it's not default private, it's default transparent. He says the problem here is that a sufficiently intelligent AI will become good enough and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so the reason they're also saying this is because they're trying to make the case that their increased amount of privacy, their marginal improvement in privacy over Monero, if you're in the shielded pool, they're trying to make the case that that has a material value. And their material value that they're assigning to that increased in privacy is based in a hypothetical future, because they can't make the claim now that Monero isn't private enough, although some people try to make that case uh, falsely. And if they do make that case, then they come up with some other thing like an inflation bug. Well, it's so private, you can't see that other coins are being minted. So they go into some other uh, redirection. But um, I know. But the thing is, if the privacy in Monero isn't good enough, then why is it used everywhere and why has nobody been arrested for using Monero if they're using it in high stakes transactions like on the DNMs? Because if the privacy is not good enough, then you would have seen people get caught for using the Monero, which they haven't. And so, because they can't make the claim that the Zcash privacy has a marginal improvement that translates into material value, they have to assign a hypothetical that comes from the future as to why Monero's privacy isn't good enough, which is where this whole AI thing is coming from. Now, to be fair, that's why the Monero bros are coming up with full chain membership proofs, which should be implemented at some point in Q1, which is the latest update that I've heard on it. But again, this is all just, here nor there. And he says Monero is looking to implement Zcash like privacy at rest, but has yet to do so. And he goes on, at least he gives that credit. A lot of Zcash people don't give the credit to full chain membership proofs and what that's going to do. And to be fair, we are relying on a technology that will be implemented in the future. And I realize that we don't have it currently. It is something to come, so we shouldn't rely on it for our argumentation, but it is a factor. But Fluffy Pony, Ricardo Spagni, he has a pretty good response to this. He says, okay, well, by that token, if we ignore FCMP, Monero becomes more private the longer you leave it because an output is included in more rings. Once FCMP goes live on mainnet and not just on testnet, then that changes because every additional transaction adds to the privacy set. which is going to be like 100 million. The shielded pool, too, grows linearly but super slowly due to the lack of default privacy. So even if this holds true, it's crushingly slow for Zcash and Monero in its current form, and only 1-to-1 linearity for Monero once FCMP goes live. So basically, it's an amazing testimonial from Zuku for Monero, which is nice. Right, and the anonymity set would be way higher for Monero actually than Zcash if it's you getting into a shielded pool by default for getting into it at all. So all things to consider. But here are just some more people from the Zcash people talking about privacy comes from value at rest. And this is Frank Braun, another big Zcash guy. Privacy comes from value at rest, not value in motion. Okay, so again, this is kind of suspicious. This is becoming a narrative. This is Vinny, who I actually like. He's a decent dude, but he's part of this narrative here. A simple and easy to understand explanation as to why Zcash's privacy is better from a value at rest shielded Zcash. Now, this guy says it's basically what we just talked about as to why it's better if you hold your coins longer in the shielded pool. Excuse me, I just ate, but longer in the shielded pool. Okay, but if this becomes too much of a thing and people have to rely on this concept and take in this concept as a kind of store of value thing, well, I'm just getting more value if I'm holding my coins in a shielded address and this becomes a meme, then this could just be the whole store of value versus medium exchange thing all over again. And it's better to have a culture for your private crypto that is not oriented this way. You almost never see people in the Zcash community talking about going out to spend your Zcash. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. Most of it is bull posting, Moonboy posting, value at rest stuff. I mean, it's nice to see Zuku buying coffee with Zcash. Don't get me wrong, okay? That's great. But that's not the majority of people. Now, I've heard some things about near intense. I've heard some promising things actually about that, where it's like they get integrated into this seemingly decentralized exchange type of thing where somebody could spend their Zcash, um, to somebody who wants to accept Bitcoin, and like this near intense thing translates that Zcash into Bitcoin. That's cool. But how many people are doing that? Is that a common thing? And I've actually heard there are privacy problems with that because you get refunded a certain amount from the near intense thing back to your wallet, and that creates a huge OPSEC issue. So, like, again, because it's not private by default, you have this issue again with, your OPSEC. But I mean, I want to see these things, right? I want to see it be used, and then I can maybe respect it some more. But if you're going to go down the path of value at rest hodl, and you're going to try to hate on Monero for just being a criminal coin, and you're just going to kind of run a dishonest campaign here, it's not going to be great. People are going to see through that. They're not going to like it. And here's a map where I guess you can spend your Zcash. Decent number of merchants, okay? I don't know how many here are accepting Zcash on the regular, but I'm glad to see that it's a thing. But I think the Zcash community needs to focus more on this if they want to earn respect from our community, because we orient ourselves on digital cash and they're trying to orient themselves on being encrypted Bitcoin. And what does Bitcoin call themselves? They call them trackable digital gold. So what are you trying to become? Untrackable digital gold? The problem with the digital gold thing is that when you're talking about gold, you're talking about something that is a material asset which has a store of value because it provides use case outside of being just a ledger for money, right? Because women like it for jewelry and for other shiny reason purposes. You know how women are. They love their gold jewelry. I actually met a girl in Istanbul. She was like, I can't wear jewelry that isn't gold because I'm allergic to all these other metals. So she loved her gold jewelry. And the Turks, they really love their gold, right? They have gold shops everywhere. Um, and it's people worldwide. The rappers, they love their gold. They love, I mean, let's say gold gets demonetized because Bitcoin takes over. Every rapper is going to have a grill full of gold. And the gold value is not going to collapse because everyone's just going to buy it to decorate their house or whatever. And that's not something that you have with cryptocurrency. It's a digital ledger, it's a digital asset. And also, gold is a superconductive metal, and so on and so forth, right? So, trying to become a digital gold is a problem. You should be trying to become digital cash. And then, if it's used as cash enough, because there are so many merchants which accept it, then you have a kind of inelastic demand because there's always somebody willing to accept it, which means there's somebody who's usually willing to pay for it because they're receiving it from somebody else. And therefore, you have this current which creates value, right? And I guess I'll call this value in motion. How about that? And then you kind of have a base layer. And that's what, again, these people don't understand about Monero being used. Where'd that tweet go? Where'd that tweet go? Yeah, this tweet being used on DNMs because you can only use cryptocurrency on DNMs. If Monero takes over that marketplace, then you're going to have a price floor for Monero. It's not going to be speculative. It's not going to be totally speculative like it is for Zcash. This is totally speculative. I do believe that. Monero is not speculative, and you know that because people need to get it in order to transact in certain marketplaces. That's a reality. And they can't get it from the centralized exchanges. And given the fact that it's been delisted from all these centralized exchanges, but people still opt to get it through decentralized exchanges like Havano or RitaSwap, where people send money in the mail to get it, or people do face-to-face transactions, or people sell stuff or goods and services through these marketplaces. That creates a demand that creates a price floor, which creates a store of value. Monero is pretty much the only store of value in the entire crypto space, although you could say Bitcoin's a store of value because of liquidity and because people use Bitcoin as a off ramp into so many other cryptos and so on and so forth. I mean, I guess to some degree you could say that's a store of value. Of course, if the government goes after Bitcoin, people think that's impossible. I still don't think that's impossible, by the way, because you have all these governments coming up with their own stable coins, all these banks coming up with their own stable coins, and BlackRock's coming up with their own tokenized technologies for things. Just like, what if they determine at some point Bitcoin is no longer necessary for their purposes, or they go to confiscate it? It'll crash. It'll crash completely, and then maybe something like a Monero takes over. So I'm still not sold yet on the store of value thing for Bitcoin totally, but Monero, you can make a better case as a store of value because it has that unique use case that is not being replicated by anything else and is evidently not going to be replicated by Zcash because their whole campaign is we don't want to replace Monero on the DNMs. We want nothing to do with the DNMs. So that means Monero is going to keep riding on. We have nothing to worry about because they're not trying to battle us at the most important battlefield there is, which really is the DNMs. And, of course, we're building marketplaces and we're building an economy outside of DNMs. And obviously, anyone who's public doesn't advocate for DNM usage or anything illegal. Okay. But if their main orient is this, the price and the market cap, I'm sorry. I mean, I don't see how this is sustainable. And that goes back to my initial point that I started the video with, which is maybe you ought to be rethinking the value proposition here. Maybe you should be actually wondering, is this really worth more than Monero here? Because culture is a factor. We have a digital cash culture. We have a culture of travel or value in travel, if you want to put it that way. That's a stupid way to put it, in my opinion. But we like to transact. We like to use it. Okay. And I have to give a shout out to Zano. I know.
Zano to
Uh,
somebody that is hearing how would you
I
describe
made a
Zano to
video
somebody
just
that
last
is
video
hearing
about Zano,
about
so
it for
maybe
the first
we'll
time?
I would
start
say
hearing about
Zano
it.
is the
But one
privacy
thing
power
I do
digitally
respect
coming,
them
and
for is
how I
that
would describe
they
it
have a culture.
to someone that is,
Mr.
completely
Quibbs, he
crypto is that
describes
many,
Zano
many people make the
as
assumption that
being a
cryptocurrencies are
privacy-powered
private by default.
digital
They
economy.
think Bitcoin is magic, private.
And that's how I like to hear private cryptos talk about their project, is that we're trying to build a private economy and we're trying to work on the digital cash use case. I don't want to hear stuff about value at rest. I want to hear, hey, we just added a new company to our Zano map or to our Zcash map. And Monero's got maps too, but these are the websites I've pulled up. Like that's the stuff we want to see because that translates into real value. That translates into real network adoption and growth. Just people buying coins, that's something that's easy to overtake. Some new shiny object comes along, they'll just sell that coin and get onto another one. But if they actively use it for business, then that's a different matter. So, is there anything else I wanted to say? Oh, I'm going to be at Monerotopia. Wanted to give this a shout out. Roma, Mexico City, the 12th to the 15th. Would love to see you there. Uh, let's see. This is my Twitter feed. Some good stuff. Let's see. I think that's all I got for you folks. So, my name is Mateo. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, do whatever. And if you want to leave a tip, you can go to my xsmartchat.com Monero CPA page. Leave me a tip, a comment, whatever you want to leave. We'll talk about it. That's all I got. God bless you. See you in the next one.